So here we go again, Chelsea back in Premier League action. This is my first team selector and preview ahead of the 25-26 season. Been watching a bit of the football so far, the Villa game against Newcastle, the quite exciting but in the end a bit disappointing Liverpool-Bournemouth game, and we await Chelsea starting it off on Sunday afternoon at home to Crystal Palace, hopefully under the sun in West London. So this game is, I think, an intriguing one because Chelsea come into it with so much confidence. I think there is a general optimism heading into this season, more so for any Chelsea season in some time. I think several years, you have to go back several years to find a season where there is such general optimism and excitement about what could happen for Chelsea if things go well on the pitch. And in the case of Crystal Palace, despite, of course, the off-field shenanigans of CAS, UEFA, Nottingham Forest, they obviously ended last season in such a brilliant fashion, and to win the Community Shield, to perform the way they did against Liverpool, and the stable base that I think Oliver Glasner has constructed at Selhurst Park makes them a threat. They absolutely are. Chelsea, of course, historically have a very good record against Crystal Palace, but we failed to beat them last year, and that is something to consider as we go into this game. Please do like, subscribe, as we will be throughout the course of this season, covering the games, previewing, reviewing, reacting to news as it goes, breaking down the tactics and everything in between. So make sure you're subscribed or following on your podcast platforms. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of the shows we're producing this season covering the greatest football club and the world champions for 25-26. So I think the best place to start is just generally this season. And yes, we've done our in-depth season prediction shows. I've done a lot of content about it. I put up a thread on my Twitter account that you can go and follow where I basically list all of the written and video and podcast stuff I've done about predicting the season. But I found it interesting just looking at Opta. They did a kind of some of the numbers of this season in terms of predictions and in terms of our percentages of doing stuff this year. So in terms of winning the title, Chelsea have an 8.4% chance of winning the Premier League title. In terms of the top four, we've got much higher, 40.4%, an over 50.2% chance of the top five. Our expected position is fourth, and expected points are 63.7. 63.7 might seem, I think, quite low, absolutely, given last season. But, in terms of what our expectation and hope is versus the reality of where Chelsea have generally been in recent years, I actually don't think 63, if you're just looking at very recent seasons, that's not, unrealistic. But of course, we are aiming to be a lot more than that this year. And I think a key player is obviously going to be Cole Palmer, 15 goals last time out, 126 shots, expected goals 17.3, 89 chances created and 8 assists. He will be vital if he can return in a goal-scoring sense to his first season at Chelsea. But even though there was a chunk of last season where it wasn't as good, Palmer still is absolutely instrumental, along with hopefully some new faces who will become instrumental for Enzo Maresca. Looking at Crystal Palace, I think the wing-backs for me are the ones that kind of stand out here. The good thing from a Chelsea point of view is it sounds like at the time of recording, Eberechi Eze will not be taking part on Sunday. It seems like the potential move to Spurs is so advanced that he will not be in the squad. Of course, we await to see the team on Sunday afternoon to see what that actually looks like. That's a massive, massive loss. Eze is a wonderful footballer. He scored a brilliant goal at the Bridge last year. He is a creative outlet for them, a creative hub for them, and why he is on the verge of making a massive move. But that is really detrimental, I think, for what Crystal Palace can do in a game like this, because I think it's pretty clear when Crystal Palace come to the Bridge the type of game they're going to play with their system, with the 3-4-3. They're going to sit in that compact shape, physically trying to be imposing in a defensive sense, limit space, keep Chelsea at arm's length, and then look for the speed of Sarr, of Eze, and then a real focal point of Mateta. And that is kind of course, the way they were able to win the FA Cup. If you look at the winning FA Cup goal against Man City, it wasn't exactly a counter-attacking goal. It was quite a direct goal, but it showed you the brilliance of Mateta, who was their top goal scorer last year with 14 in the Premier League, which is a really good total for a team that finished 12th. And the way he was able to drop back to kind of a more, kind of a deeper striker position, and then of course you have the players around you that he can then unleash, really, and that is the chaos. And it was something that Liverpool really struggled with, particularly the movement of Munoz as a right wing back. I've seen it several times against some really good teams, how he's able, especially as a right wing back, the license to verge up the pitch, to make daring runs, sometimes inverted runs, kind of out to in, that can be really devastating, especially when you're playing that three back system. And defensively too, if Mark Guehi stays around, this is another thing, and I spoke about this in my general Premier League predictions. If you can keep Guehi and Eze, at least one of them, that would be, I think, very good for Oliver Glasner. Adam Wharton, I think, is a really, really good young midfielder. We know this. There's even been chatter and rumours of Real Madrid being interested. He is someone that can add an elegance and a control to a team that can be a bit functional, but I think is very well structured and disciplined in what they do. They're quite methodical, Crystal Palace, and it's quite clear what they're going to do, but that doesn't mean they can't be effective. So from a Chelsea point of view, I think it is a really good opening day test, because you're coming up against a type of team Chelsea have to become very good at beating. Are not going to press you high. It's not going to be a PSG situation where Chelsea can have 30% of the ball and keep hitting the team against them over and over again. There will be moments like that this year, but I think this kind of game is the average Chelsea game at Stamford Bridge, and one that at times Chelsea have really struggled to become good at succeeding in. And that's why I think it's a good one. Now, I do think Chelsea are in a good place to confront this game on opening day, but it is, I think a good test for them against a team not newly promoted, very well experienced in the Premier League, a very wise head coach, and some talent even without Eberechi Eze, like Sarr, I think in particular on a counter-attacking sense, with that speed of his and the physicality of Mateta, that make them a potential problem for Chelsea in this game. So let's move on to my starting 11. Sometimes when I do my first starting 11 on my team selector for opening day, it sometimes is very hard because you're kind of guessing. Even if you've watched pre-season games, you are guessing, you don't really have a lot of competitive games to go off. However, I think this is slightly different this year because we have the Club World Cup as a lot of evidence, and we also have, I think, last weekend, I think there is some legitimacy in my belief that there is a clear 11 that I think Maresca is going to field. There may be some shocks within that, but I think generally this is kind of what I would very likely expect Maresca is looking to put out on his first game of the season, of his second season at Stamford Bridge. And I think it's about understanding who he's trusted, who's been playing well, who probably needs a bit more minutes in the legs to get up to speed, but then also players that he probably trusts that can play a bulk of minutes. And then I do have options off the bench this year, exciting ones that I didn't have last, to maybe change up the game if needed, or freshen the legs, keep Chelsea dominant. Those are those things that I think are going to be key in terms of how Maresca manages his minutes of his players this year, because obviously coming off the Club World Cup, the fatigue factor, that is also going to be something big. But at the moment, there feels to be a lot of natural adrenaline running through this team, and you want to maintain it for as long as possible. In goal, I am slightly surprised he's still here, but you can't deny he had an amazing performance in the Club World Cup final. He remains Chelsea's number one, and that is Robert Sanchez. It doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. My hope for Robert Sanchez this season is the closing run of last season, and even some of his best performances last season right at the start. That is the Robert Sanchez we see, the average Robert Sanchez performance, because the majority of his Chelsea career is still quite concerning. Can this be the season where he completely turns around the perception of him? Because if Mike Penders is coming eventually, if there's another goalkeeper that we may go for in the future, he needs to nail down that place and not be the liability that unfortunately he was at times last year. The back four, arguably as well, of course, naturally a back three in possession. Reece James, great that he has stayed fit for as long as he had, touchwood. That's in itself a massive achievement, and I do think we'll start this season at right back, potentially moving into both a right centre-back and also central midfield position, which we see him do for Enzo Maresca. I think the back two, so much has been talked about with this because, of course, Levi Colwell's injury, and we did a show about Maresca's quotes and some of the embargoed quotes that have been reacted to. Not going to do that on today's show because that's a separate kind of transfer issue. But I do feel that there is a clear two that, to me, just based on the evidence of what I saw Maresca do last season, I think Tosin Adarabioyo and Trevor Chalobah will be the starting defensive duo. It would be great, and I think really exciting to see Josh Acheampong given his first Premier League, or at least second or third Premier League start, I think it was, because he definitely got one or two last year It'd be a while since he's had his last Premier League start. That would be a massive vote of confidence. It'd be a massive sign that Maresca really trusts him and is putting him there as a chance to take an opportunity. And I wouldn't be disappointed. But I just feel these are two defenders who he played a lot at the end of last season, a lot in the Club World Cup. And I think he probably trusts in this kind of occasion, physically too, coming up against Mateta. I think more so for Tosin Adarabioyo, he'll trust those two players. Marc Cucurella, fully transformed, on the verge of getting that new deal. Obviously, he's going to start and hopefully can continue his knack of scoring goals at Stamford Bridge. I do think the midfield duo will obviously be Moises Caicedo, our phenomenal player of the year last year, and Enzo Fernandez. Enzo Fernandez looked a little bit rusty, but I don't think it will take him that long to get back into the swing of things once he starts playing again. So I think Enzo Fernandez, a senior player, will start this game. And what you do have in central midfield this year is depth, is actually adequate depth, which you didn't have last year. Andre Santos, I think, has looked really good, especially playing in a deeper, controlling role. So again, with the options you have on the bench, you can bring him on later in the game. And I think over the course of this season, very fascinated to see how Andre Santos develops and challenges for a regular starting spot and where that will be positioned. And of course, Dario Asugo as well, if you want to rotate with Moises Caicedo. Then we get into the three behind the striker. I do think there is obviously a lot of natural excitement. I have it, you have it, many of us have it, to see Estevao play and to see him light up Stamford Bridge. However, I do think being a little bit cautious or just a little bit more patient is probably the best course of action here, which is why I think Pedro Neto, again, the more senior player, will start this season. He's had a really, really good summer, given what he did at the Club World Cup, of course, having to deal with the loss of a very close friend and in the football family, of course, Diogo Jota. Many of our thoughts, of course, again, remembering that, tragedy this weekend. I think it's just incredible the way Neto as an individual has responded to that. And I really hope this second season can be significantly better for him than his first. His first wasn't atrocious, but in terms of output, I think it needs to be a lot better. And I think the competition that Estevao is going to provide will hopefully push Pedro Neto to get better. And what I like is Pedro Neto can start the game. You then have Estevao to come on for maybe 40 minutes if needed, maybe a little bit less. And that is a real danger and great for it to have. And if you're the opposing team, probably don't want to see that, if you've been run ragged a little bit by Neto. Palmer obviously starts as the number 10. I think Jamie Gittens gets his full Premier League debut in this game. I think he's looked very exciting in what we've seen so far in those two pre-season friendly games, given this is a guy who wasn't around for the Club World Cup, who maybe was forgotten about a little bit, and when we were signing him, there wasn't that much hype around him. I do think his acceleration on the ball, his suitability for what Enzo Maresca wants from his wide players, I think is also a key reason this was a logical signing. The 1v1, taking players on, taking shots, some of the numbers suggesting that with time, at only 20, 21 years old, he can develop into a really, really promising and effective wide player. So I think he'll get the platform as a left winger here to start and hopefully impress in his first Chelsea competitive appearance. And all that's left to do is to say that Joao Pedro, obviously, I think starts as the centre forward. I think that is one of the more... Palmer starting, Cucurella starting, Caicedo starting, and I think Sanchez, and I think the other kind of guaranteed name on this team sheet for me is Joao Pedro. I'd be absolutely flabbergasted if Joao Pedro is not starting this game. The guy has had one of the best starts to a Chelsea career I have ever seen, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic there. He arrives at the Club World Cup, he scores 2 incredible goals in the semi-final, he scores an amazing chip in the final. We've seen what he's done in the 2 pre-season friendly games, scoring in both. There just seems to be confidence radiating off Joao Pedro. And again, trying to maintain that, trying to inject as much of that, and this is a chance for him to really step up and to prove he can be a real transformative, maybe focal point for Chelsea, and he's really being given a vote of confidence as Chelsea's number 9. So although he doesn't have the number 9 on the back of his shirt, that of course is Liam Delap, and I do think that the competition between those two players is also, I think, a real positive this year, something we didn't have last year. Again, a bit like the Neto Estevao battle, I think the Pedro Delap battle is going to be a fascinating one to see, and hopefully both of them can push each other, but I think Pedro is the clear starter right now. So there we have it. My first lineup of the season. Please do get involved in the comments below and give me your predicted lineups. We will see whether Chelsea can get back to winning ways against Crystal Palace, start the season off on a really positive note at the Bridge, and hopefully continue what has been a very, very good summer for the Blues. Please follow across the socials at SonOfChelsea. Be back on Sunday evening/night to review whatever happens in the game, and I'll see you again very, very soon. All the best.